Do you remember what it felt like? That spark, that fire, the feeling of being so completely absorbed in an activity, a conversation, or a piece of music that time itself seemed to dissolve. The feeling of passion, of genuine interest, of a vibrant, colorful engagement with the world. Now, I want you to ask yourself, with unflinching honesty, where did that feeling go? For many of us, as we navigate the complexities of adult life, a slow, creeping grayness can begin to descend. The colors of the world seem to fade. The highs are less high, the lows are less sharp. We find ourselves just going through the motions, performing our duties, meeting our obligations, but with an inner world that has become muted, indifferent, and profoundly quiet. This is the experience of existential apathy. Welcome to Existential Psychology Insights. If you are someone who seeks to understand not just the how of life, but the deep why behind your own psychological experiences, I invite you to subscribe and join our community of inquiry. Today we are exploring one of the most painful and disorienting states of the human condition, the loss of passion and the onset of profound apathy. This is not simple boredom. This is a deeper malaise, a crisis of vitality, the feeling that your heart, once a source of warmth and energy, has slowly turned to stone. We will argue that this is not a character flaw or a sign of weakness, but a profound psychological signal that deserves our utmost attention. It is a symptom of a deeper existential issue that must be addressed if we are to reclaim a life worth living. To begin, we must differentiate. While existential apathy can overlap with clinical depression and can certainly be a feature of it, they are not always the same thing. One can be functionally fine, going to work, managing responsibilities, yet feel completely hollow inside, devoid of the emotional texture that makes life feel real. This is the state we are examining, the loss of affect, the loss of caring, the sense that nothing truly matters anymore. So how does this happen? How does a passionate, engaged individual become a ghost in their own life? From a psychological and existential perspective, apathy is often not a primary state, but a secondary one. It is, in many cases, a powerful and highly developed defense mechanism. It is a protective shell the psyche builds around itself after prolonged exposure to pain, disappointment, or overwhelming anxiety. Imagine a life filled with chronic disappointment. You try and you fail. You open your heart and you get hurt. You pursue a dream and it crumbles. After enough blows, the psyche may make a subconscious calculation. To feel is to be vulnerable to pain. Therefore, to avoid pain, I must stop feeling. Apathy becomes a kind of emotional armor. It numbs the pain of failure and rejection, but it comes at a terrible cost. It also numbs our capacity for joy, for connection, and for passion. You can't selectively numb emotions. When you shut down the channels to pain, you also shut down the channels to pleasure and meaning. You achieve a state of safety, but it is the safety of the tomb. This is often inextricably linked to a crisis of meaning. Passion is the emotional fuel that drives us toward what we value. It is the energy that flows from a sense of purpose. When we lose our sense of purpose, when our central life projects lose their meaning, the fuel line to passion is cut. If you are working a job you no longer believe in, or are in a relationship that has lost its core connection, or are pursuing goals that you've discovered are hollow, your psyche will refuse to invest its precious energy. Apathy in this sense is a kind of psychological strike. It is your soul's way of saying, I will no longer expend my vitality on something that is meaningless. It is a passive revolt against an unauthentic life. This is especially true when we live a life dictated by what we feel we should do, rather than what we authentically want to do. The tyranny of the shoulds, I should be more successful, I should want a family, I should be happy with this job, is a fire extinguisher for the flames of genuine desire. When our life becomes a checklist of external expectations, we become alienated from our own inner world, from the spontaneous wellspring of our true interests. We are performing a life, not living it. And performance, without authentic feeling behind it, is utterly draining and inevitably leads to a state of profound indifference. Another powerful psychological pathway to apathy is the phenomenon of learned helplessness. Coined by psychologist Martin Seligman, this describes a state that occurs after an organism has endured repeated, unavoidable, aversive stimuli. It eventually learns to believe that it has no control over its situation and stops trying to escape, even when opportunities for escape are presented. In human terms, if we repeatedly find ourselves in situations where our efforts seem to make no difference, perhaps in a toxic work environment with no autonomy or a restrictive social system, we can learn that our actions are futile. This belief is the death knell for motivation and passion. Why feel passion for something if you believe you are powerless to affect the outcome? Apathy becomes a logical, if tragic, conclusion. So, how do we begin the journey back? How do we crack the stone and begin to feel again? This is not a process of thinking ourselves into feeling passionate. It is a process of courageous action and re-engagement with the world. It is the path of re-enchantment. The first step, and the most crucial, is to reconnect with your authentic self and your core values. This requires a period of honest introspection, perhaps through journaling, therapy, or deep reflection in solitude. You must ask yourself the questions you may have been avoiding. What truly matters to me, beneath all the layers of societal conditioning? When in my life did I last feel genuinely alive and engaged? What activities, people, or ideas sparked that feeling? The goal is to create a new compass, one that is oriented not toward external shoulds, but towards your own internal North Star. Once you have a glimmer of what truly matters, the next step is value-based action. You cannot wait to feel motivated to act. You must act your way into feeling. Choose one small, manageable action that is in alignment with one of your rediscovered values, and do it. If you value creativity, don't wait for inspiration. Spend 15 minutes sketching, writing, or playing an instrument, even if it feels mechanical at first. If you value connection, don't wait until you feel less apathetic. Reach out to one friend and ask them a meaningful question. Action is the friction that can reignite the spark. We must also deliberately introduce novelty and break our rigid routines. Apathy thrives on sameness and predictability. When everything is familiar, the brain goes on autopilot. Breaking your routine even in small ways, taking a different route to work, trying a new type of food, listening to music you've never heard before, visiting a new place in your own city, forces your brain to create new neural pathways. It reawakens your senses and reminds your psyche that the world is still full of unexplored possibilities. This is the process of re-enchanting your world, of seeing it with fresh eyes. Perhaps most importantly, this journey requires the courage to feel again. You must be willing to dismantle the protective shell of apathy, knowing that this will make you vulnerable not only to joy and passion, but also to pain and disappointment. This is the existential bargain. There is no vitality without vulnerability. To live a rich, emotionally textured life means accepting the entire spectrum of human feeling. The psychology of feeling nothing is the psychology of a life put on hold, a soul in hiding. It is a profound signal that the way you have been living is no longer sustainable. It is a painful but necessary invitation to stop, to listen, and to begin the courageous work of building a life that is so deeply aligned with your authentic self that your passion has no choice but to return, not as a fleeting spark, but as a steady, life-giving flame.